This is the third Sunday in Easter. I was asked not that long ago if there was rewriting of the Gospels, of any of the Bible. So I had to explain a little bit about how the Bible was put together. Oral traditions, letters, statements, teachings that crossed 1,000 year period, really, when they gather them all together. And we start with the Hebrew scriptures and look at the Christian scriptures. It's not rewriting so much as it's editing and embellishing and maybe removing some stuff we don't know, because the oldest versions we have of the Gospels date back to the third century, maybe in the 300s, the fourth century. So we don't actually have what would have been written originally in the first century. So we have to work it through and see what's going on and look at the text to see the politics of what was happening. And our scripture today, John 21, is very evidently a political move. Now, if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll know that Peter is not my favorite character. There's also no historical validity to suggesting that he started the church in Rome. There's no historic evidence that he ever got there. In fact, it's the historic evidence that Paul got there is kind of sketchy. But we have this verse, this chapter, tapped on to the end of the Gospel of John. Now, there's two Gospels really that have they're not really epilogues because they don't kind of wrap up the story in the Gospel itself. They're add-ons. They're additions. Someone later decided this needed to be a thing, so they pushed it on. Now, if you go to the Bible and you look at the end of the Gospel of Mark, you'll see different endings. And you'll see that one of those endings copies the ending that is in Luke. So whoever was working with the Gospel of Luke felt that Mark needed that ending to be part of the full story because they didn't like how it ended originally, I guess. When you come to John, however, it is very much a slap on end that has no connection with what is going on in the rest of the gospel. And that's one of the things that makes it interesting because it's a political move. There's a reason why it's there. And it is there to be the last word to kind of take away from what has gone on earlier in chapter 20 that was considered the last word. And if you look at the end of chapter 20, it'll say this is the end, essentially. There's a reason it's slapped on. And the reason, I think, is to dismiss the fact that the early church, the beloved disciple, was most likely Mary Magdalene. She had the longest resurrection experience, and Peter was never part of that. Peter denied, and then he kind of disappears. So we have the chapter 21 now shoved on the back of that, and there, we know historically the women's camp led by Mary Magdalene and the men's camp led by Simon Peter, they didn't always get along, and they didn't get along at the top. Peter and Mary were not the greatest friends, and from evidence we have, Peter was usually the problem. But again, so our evidence is limited. All of that is to say, there's a reason why this was tacked on. It is meant to distract from some of the other stuff, or it's meant to clean up Peter's image. Whatever the reason, we have a definite Peter focus going forward that legitimizes the legend, essentially, the mythology of Peter being the one that carries the church. Going forward, starts the church in Rome. What's interesting is the Church of Rome doesn't even have real significance until several centuries after this gospel is supposed to be put together. So someone came back, and we do actually have experiences of the Gospel of John that doesn't have the 21st gospel or chapter a part of it. That's all the politics behind the scene, and it's important to know this stuff so you can use that as a bit of a lens or a clearing to see what's going on. But the story itself tells us something about how the church at the time saw the role that early leadership was supposed to play. We first have the fisher folk disciples going out and they didn't have any fish. And then are sent back out and more fish comes in. And John, who is theoretically redubbed the beloved disciple, says, "Oh, that's Jesus. That's the Lord on the shore." And we have a story of Peter jumping out of the boat and rushing to the shore while everybody else brings in the catch. And then they have the campfire around where they have their food. And Jesus quizzes Peter. He says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Of course I do." And Jesus says, "Feed my lambs." And then, of course, the second one is, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Of course, you know I do. Tend my sheep." And the third question, by this time, Peter's getting really upset. "Don't you believe me?" kind of response. And Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." In none of these does Jesus justify why he's challenging Peter. It almost doesn't matter. There's some theory that this was written to kind of offset the three questions that where Peter denied Jesus in the main text of all the Gospels. But the questions are what really matters in all of this. Challenging someone who just flippantly says, "Of course," after a history of denying. Someone saying when it's safe, when there's no threat, when there's nothing going on, go do the work. We can take that question and we can remove it from Peter and put it on others. Jesus asking the church, "Do you love me?" "Oh yes, oh yes," when it's convenient, when there's no challenge, when there's no one else around, when it's in a safe space. And Jesus doesn't really acknowledge the answer, just gives them instructions. Feed the lambs, feed the sheep, tend the church. And the more agitated we get at the question, because we are the church, kind of lends ourselves to the frustration of, why can't you believe me? Why aren't my words good enough? The thing is, words aren't. It is a matter of action. When Jesus is giving that instructions, it might be Peter as the focus, but it's all of us who are being asked. If you love me is essentially the conversation. Then do the work. Do the job. We get so caught up in Western Christianity with the "Do you love Jesus?" Jesus never, ever asked if you love me as a full question. It was always the gateway to another point. We're not called to worship Jesus the way the church does. We see so many books that are like, how can you have a great relationship with Jesus? How can you fix yourself so Jesus will find you acceptable? That's not the question. And that's not the question asked here in the 21st chapter. If you love me, do the work. Our faith is not about putting Jesus on a pedestal. Our faith is about following and doing the work. And yeah, ticking off the legal authorities and challenging the status quo and really questioning whether or not someone who has political and social authority is really doing the loving God stuff that they claim. Feed the lambs, meaning tend to the ones who are vulnerable. Feed the sheep. Tend to the ones who are more able to take care of themselves, but still need that kind of level. Tend to them. It's more than just giving them pablum or giving us and us giving others something really simple and really basic. It's not even about us specifically. It's about caring for the world, tending to the world, responding to the needs of the most vulnerable. If we love Jesus, if we want to follow Jesus, if we want to be authentic believers as Christians, we have to do the work. And it is not complicated, no matter what churches have tried to make it out. Following Jesus is not a difficult process at all, but we have to make that choice. Just like Peter is being asked, we're being asked. Are we going to make it the action of our faith? And Jesus promises through the scripture, eventually, other things are going to happen to us. Might not be comfortable, might not be enjoyable. We'll get old. Someone else will need to take care of us. But when we are able, when we are in that place of power, when we are people who understand the love that Jesus had for people, it is on us to copy that love, to live it, to be representative of it. We getting frustrated that Jesus keeps asking us is kind of an indication that we're really not living our word. So look in the mirror, ask yourself, are you doing the work to the best of your ability right now? If the answer is not quite, you got room to grow. And Jesus is not giving up on any of us when we've got room to grow. Don't speak in absolutes. Just go and do the work.